Welcome to the woods. It's been a while, 2 weeks, so I apologise for not getting a video done sooner, but it's been a really busy 2 weeks. I touched on it briefly in the last video, but we've had more rules and restrictions imposed by DEFRA to do with avian flu, which meant we spent 2 weeks building polytunnels, putting up roofs, watching roofs fall down, refixing roofs, wrapping pens in netting, moving 120 chickens all over the place, turkeys, ducks. It's been a long 2 weeks, but it's done. And again, that's not what I'm going to talk about today. But, as I mentioned last time, a lot of these rules, restrictions, a lot of the procedures we've had to put in place, and some of them are quite draconian. I've got to keep a record of anyone who comes to the premises. I've got to keep those records. I've got to scrub the tyres of my vehicle when I leave and when I re-enter. Ludicrous measures, and these are designed to stop people like myself from keeping poultry, fowl, chickens, geese, ducks, because they don't want us to keep them. By keeping these livestock, we're not dependent on major suppliers. I'm able to feed myself, and that's not something they want going forwards. And it kind of ties in with what I wanted to talk about today. So something cropped up a couple of weeks ago to do with Oxford in the UK. Beautiful city. Many of you will know Oxford. Those who live in Britain certainly know it, and even those from outside, because of the university, made famous again through a popular TV series, Inspector Morse. Oxford, just like every other city, town, area in the UK, is signed up to the Agenda 30 concept. And part of that agenda is to restructure each area, each city, as a smart city. And part of that smart city is surveillance. And part of it is to section these areas and towns and cities into 15-minute neighbourhoods. And this is exactly what Oxford has done. It has split the city into 6 areas that are supposedly 15-minute neighbourhoods. And the people in those zones, each of those 6 zones, will only be allowed to drive out of them twice a week. You can drive wherever you want within your zone, but you can only leave twice a week. 100 times a year, which is actually less than twice a week. If you drive out of your zone more than that, you'll be fined £70 every time. Thus keeping the population static and within a restrictive area. And this is how these smart cities evolve. Apparently each household will be allowed a permit that will allow them to leave their zone twice a week, and each household will be allowed up to 3 permits. Up to 3. What happens if there's 4 people in that household who drive? Does that mean one can't leave, or that 2 of them need to share a permit? The fine details on this haven't been released, but the local councillor has said that it's going ahead no matter what. No matter what the people think or what they say, this scheme is going ahead. I can't see any positive for the people. To be told where you can go and how often you can go there under punishment of ludicrous amounts of money. And they've said, well, there are ways that you can get round this. You could head out backwards from your zone to a ring road, drive 30 minutes around the city and re-enter. You'll probably find they'll come up with a way of charging people to enter the city. So whichever way you're going to be stung. And it looks like Oxford's the first city to break itself down into these 15-minute neighbourhoods. And by 15 minutes, that's not a 15-minute drive, that's a 15-minute walk. So that your local amenities, there's a shop within 15 minutes, there's a school within 15 minutes, there's a hospital, hopefully, within 15 minutes. Everything you need is there, so you don't need to leave. And that might very well be true. But it's nobody's place to tell you that you can't leave. And that's exactly what they're doing. For those of you that haven't heard about this, I'll just take 5 minutes to have a think. Imagine that you can't leave an area larger than 15 minutes walk. How far can you go in 15 minutes? It's not that big, is it? And I'm sure that the British public will find ways round this. We always do. But that's not the point. The point is, why are we having to? Who voted for this? Who voted for a system that tells you when you can leave your zone? Who voted to be told you have to stay in a zone? No one. None of us did. These things are being implemented regardless of what the people want. The second thing I wanted to touch on was the strategic placement of illegal immigrants throughout this country. It seems to be a mainstream talking point now in Parliament, on the news, that there seems to be far too many people entering the country illegally. Most of them coming across the channel on dinghies, then being ferried at your expense to 4-star hotels. throughout the whole country at a cost of £7 million a day. That's your money. I'm not sure how many of you voted for that, but not many. And these 4-star hotels seem to be cropping up increasingly in areas outside of what would have usually been the destination of immigrants. It's widely accepted that the larger cities attract people that come to this country. They tend to be the more diverse areas, for better or worse. But these hotels seem to be cropping up in places like Ilfracombe, in Devon, in Cornwall, in Wiltshire, in sleepy hamlets in Wales, in tiny villages in the north of the country. And I need to ask myself, when I look at the placement, why would they do that? And it could very well tie in with the fact that as these cities become more and more restrictive, then the phenomenon which we've labelled white flight, which is when an area becomes increasingly diverse, the indigenous white population tends to move out. And this has been happening for years. You move out of London to the suburbs, and then from the suburbs into the countryside, down into Wiltshire and Cornwall. It would seem to be that these hotels are ensuring that the diversification of the United Kingdom is blanketed, that there is no longer an area to flee to. So you may as well stay in your city, and you will stay in your zone. If you try to leave at the moment, you'll be fined. And I expect over the coming years that that punishment could very well become harsher. Most people watching this will know that in China their social credit system restricts people from everyday things like public transport, the ability to use the local supermarket. And as these zones within these smart cities become more restrictive, your credit score will depend on your attitude, your behaviour. You may not be allowed to leave twice a week if you've been late for work, or if you've stepped into the road where there isn't a zebra crossing. Your credit score could restrict you from any number of things. And this isn't trying to describe some dystopian future that may not happen. It's happening now. Today. Oxford's first. we wait to see who will be second. And how do they get the people from rural areas into these smart cities? Well, if you take my local town, a small market town in Wiltshire, it used to have 5 banks. It now has 1. The post office has moved from its former headquarters, tucked away now in the back of a newsagent's. You can't get everything there, so now you need to travel, which you may only be allowed to do twice a week. It's going to become impossible to do what you would like to do, and they don't care at all. The time is past when we have to say no. What we need to be doing now is pointing out at every opportunity what is happening, why it's happening, and what's coming in the future. Most people don't know, and that's the truth. I mentioned in a video not long ago that if you were to walk into the street and ask somebody their opinion on the World Economic Forum, most of them wouldn't even know what you were talking about. Not until these restrictive measures, these obstacles to freedom are placed directly in front of them, will they realise what's happening. And by then, it's too late. It is our job, it's your job, to tell every single person who will listen. And yes, some of them won't believe you. And yes, some of them won't see the harm in it. But little by little, what you tell them sinks in. And then they'll notice something else. And then what you've said will be confirmed. And bit by bit, we bring more and more people over to our way of thinking. Don't stop talking. It can be frustrating. But if we're going to find a way through this, we're going to need the numbers. Keep talking. Every time you're proved right, go back and tell them. Show them. Find out more about what's going on yourself so that you can inform other people. Take it easy, you lot. I apologise it took me 2 weeks, but it has been manic here. I've got a load to do over the next week as well. I've got to rebuild the water system. I'll go into that on another video, I think. But it's not raining today. And after 2 solid weeks of rain, it's nice to have a little bit of sunshine. Keep your chin up. Keep fighting. We'll win this in the end. Speak to you soon, you lot.